Good morning, good afternoon. This is me again. This is Startup School again. We have a Tuesday. This is Timon from Google from Startups, and this is Startup School. This is week 5 of Startup School, and today we're going to have an exciting class about deploying and hosting apps in the cloud somewhere up there. Um, I think this topic is important. We've learned so far a lot about different products and solutions, but ultimately, you all probably want to create your own micro or macro apps and host them in the cloud for your customers. But before we jump into the topic, most of you should know the drill right now. I will just take a few minutes to remind you about a few of the housekeeping rules and the structure of Startup School. Today we are meeting for the live class, and on Thursday we're going to have a live class as well. Sometimes we are recommending the code labs and notebooks for you. They all are available on Google/GenAI-Labs. We're going to update this doc very soon with this week's recommendations. Take your time after this class to practice, but take your time today right now to ask all your questions about the topic about deploying apps in cloud in the Q&A panel. Below my screen, somewhere like here, we have a summary and Q&A. If you click on Q&A, you can post a question to many of our AI experts, Googlers that are today with us to answer all your questions. As you know, most of you know, this is recorded. This will be available in about 10 hours for you to watch on demand. If you want to go back to any of the classes that we had so far, they're all available for you. When it comes to the skills boost, we recently received less and less questions about it. So I guess most of you know already how to get it. But if you still need some advice or instructions, there are instructions at your hand available on the resources on our website, but you can always shoot an email at startupschool@google.com and we will be happy to help you. That would be it because it's week 5. Most of you are here with us every single time we have a session. So you know the drill, as I said earlier. All that is left to me is to invite our fantastic speaker for today, Roman, who is a developer advocate and will tell you everything and show you exactly step by step how to deploy app in the cloud. Roman, we will gonna see each other in about an hour. As usual, here in Startup School, we have a time at the end, about 10 minutes for live Q&A. I will ask you most of the common questions, those that are upvoted. But to all of you attendants, please write down your questions. Please upvote questions of other people. Don't be shy to discuss with each other while we're having this training. Good luck, have fun, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Timon, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joined in. So today we'll be taking a look at what you've been learning so far in terms of the models, but how do we go ahead and create these applications on Google Cloud? In other words, how do we go ahead and deploy this? What are the different options available and so on? So as we go along, I'm Ramin Irani. I work as a developer advocate at Google Cloud. And in my role, I work with developers to make sure that they're able to create successful apps on Google Cloud. In terms of the agenda that we've sort of laid out, the key thing that we're going to be highlighting, so we've got different sections as we go along eventually, and we see the demo. But first, we'll highlight some of our tools that are there. So if you've got an application that you built out, what could be some of the services that you could make use of? And primarily, we're going to be focusing, and there are slides which will cover that, key things around like serverless tools. And you may have heard about some of our services like Cloud Run, Cloud Function. So how do we sort of use this? When do we use one over the other? How do we sort of integrate these into our application? So we'll be discussing not just what these services are, but eventually we'll see how we can get all of this together and I'll demonstrate one application that we've built that sort of exercises our Gemini API, not just from text-based recommendations, but even multimodal inputs around images, videos, and all of this comes together eventually, and we will host the application on Cloud Run. So later on, I'll be actually going through a step-by-step thing of how we could take an application like that and deploy it on Google Cloud. You'll see me do that. But as Timon mentioned, all of these instructions will also be made available to you. So should you want to sort of go back and try it out, maybe substitute it with your own application in your account, you'll be able to see what would be the common steps to do that. So having said that, right, first I just wanted to maybe highlight some of our serverless tools and the Cloud Run, Cloud Functions services that are there. So before I get there, just wanted to combine two key things that we sort of come across again and again. So obviously the theme for this or today's session is more around how we are going to be taking these applications and deploying it on the cloud. But again, there are two aspects to it. One is what cloud brings to the table. So obviously, I don't have to explain some of the benefits that the cloud brings in terms of giving you the infrastructure that helps you scale these applications. But the other thing also, which would be on your mind, is how do we sort of package these applications with the right dependencies. You could be using maybe a programming language of your choice. You could be probably using a framework that you prefer to use. But how do we put it all together? And for most of you, you would have come across containers as like a common ground or common format by which we could build, deploy, applications that are portable. So obviously, you will see that these services, well, they're not just managed services, but they also have full support for container based technology. So as long as you can, let's say, take your application and packages as a container, you should be good enough to use these services and deploy your application. So it's a combination of these two that makes it like very powerful eventually when you deploy your applications. Having said that, uh, again, like I mentioned, we'll be focusing on the serverless aspects of the tools. While you could always say that just give me a virtual machine and I know what to do. I know where I can install my software dependencies, etc. But we want to go a little bit beyond that, where one of the uh, primary assumptions that we are making is that, or at least what we want to put across, is that let the developer focus on the application while many of the other cross-cutting requirements that could be there from the whole provisioning part, the infrastructure, etc., are sort of taken care of by the cloud provider. So primarily that is where serverless services are coming into play. So we will be focusing on the serverless options that you have to not just deploy something like maybe an API, but even these complete applications. So primarily it's serverless, and then we've got a combination of these two services that we want to talk about. So one is Cloud Functions and Cloud Run. I have a few slides coming up, ahead also, which talk a little bit more about that. But at the end of the day, right, it's all going to be about the kind of abstraction that you want. So would you want abstraction which is at the level of a function itself, or would you like to package maybe your whole application with its dependencies? It could be maybe a web application itself. So that's where you would possibly use functions versus Cloud Run. Behind the scenes now, with our latest versions, they're still powered by Cloud Run. So again, the whole container aspect comes into play. Again, while today's topic would be focused on taking the application and then deploying it on let's say Cloud Run, for example, what you also see on the right side is that should you want to explore more services on Google Cloud, maybe a database that is there, or probably something like a warehouse service that we've got like BigQuery, or even blob storage, PubSub, many other services. The premise out here is that all of these are well integrated across. So should you want to take your next journey with some of the things that you're deploying, and what you'll see today, it's quite well integrated with all of the other cloud services that are there. So now doubling down into Cloud Run and Cloud Functions. Cloud Run primarily, if you think about it, right? If you've got an application that we could package as a container, Cloud Run is an excellent service for you to deploy such applications. So you could basically take, let's say, a web application, or in our case today, we will be looking at a Streamlit application that integrates with the Gemini API. So we put that application together with its dependencies, and then we go ahead and deploy that on Cloud Run. Once it's deployed, you could either invoke it, you get a URL, or possibly you could even trigger it. Depending upon some event, or let's say you want to say every 12 hours just invoke this application and do its work. You could even do scheduling of that sort. It's completely serverless. You're not like doing any kind of cluster management. And key thing over here is, since it allows you to use a container image, you have the choice where you can possibly say that I'm going to write my application using a programming language of my choice and a framework of my choice. But as long as I can put it into a Docker container, I'm good to use Cloud Run. So that flexibility is there with Cloud Run. Again, you can look up the documentation. I've just sort of captured. There's a very generous free tier also available by which you can sort of deploy these applications. And then if you want more powerful machines to do that, or even if it goes beyond some of the numbers that you see here, there's always a paid option that is available for that. Again, the abstraction here is of an application. So think about maybe a full blown web application. It could even be an API that you're hosting, right? But the thing is, you're actually putting it into a container image and then deploying it on Cloud Run. That's one kind of abstraction. However, if your abstraction is much more granular, like a function. So for those of you who are familiar with functions as a service, even with other cloud providers in Google Cloud, the functions as a service that we've got here is called Cloud Functions. Again, it supports multiple programming languages, but the abstraction is that of a function. So you define the function, put in the logic that's there in a function, and then you decide how it's going to get triggered. So do you want to call it directly via HTTP endpoint, or even based on some event that happens in Google Cloud? Could be publishing a message to a queue, or on a particular schedule, and so on. Again, supports popular languages. You can directly deploy from your source code, also via some of the connectivities that you have with source control systems, and so on. But keep in mind that these two services, if I have to summarize, it's all going to be about the abstraction. Is it functions, or is it a complete much application, or a full API that you're thinking about? So given these, let's move a little forward in terms of a bigger picture that we've got. So how do we go about, right, sort of putting these applications onto the cloud? And I think it's important to look at the whole end-to-end tool set that we've got, right from the time, from, for example, in this slide, from the left side, where you're inside your, let's say, a preferred IDE, or you're working out there. And then as you go along, right, you find that you may check in some code into source control repositories. Then you may build, the whole artifact. Then after that, you may have to push it and put that registry, artifact into some kind of a registry, which you see over there, or maybe even deploy directly. What you see in runtime are various services that we've got. So the two of them which I've talked about today are Cloud Functions and Cloud Run, but you could potentially install that, or basically deploy that even on any of the other services. So the thing is that Google Cloud gives you all of these tools, and we are going to be seeing some of these tools actually in action. These are things, while I'll be showing you step by step today in a manual way that I'll be executing, you will notice that eventually it's completely up to you to even automate this. So you can even automate it to a level that the moment you check in something in one of the source code repositories, a build automatically gets triggered, that builds the artifact, puts it in the registry, and then deploys into the respective runtime environment. So what we'll be seeing today, I'll show you the same slide, but maybe highlighted in a manner that you're seeing over here. And I'll be showing you all of these steps step by step. The documentation as well as the links that we will be sharing with you have all of this information also, how you could do that. But primarily, what we'll be doing is we'll be taking an existing application that we've written. We'll be firing off a cloud build, which is one of our services that can actually build the artifact. In this case, it's the Docker, container image, and then it puts the image in a artifact registry, which is one of the ways we can store some of these artifacts in Google Cloud, and then we deploy a service or basically the application in Cloud Run. We'll see all of these steps one by one. We'll come to this slide once again towards the end so that you again see the picture of what we did. I could have just used one or two commands and maybe deployed it into Cloud Run, but I wanted to give you the big picture out here so that you can see that the tools are available end to end completely over here, and we'll be seeing some of these things now. So just going forward from this, let's switch gears a bit and talk about like eventually the application that we are going to be looking at, or maybe the applications that you'll be writing, are using some of the foundational models that we have released recently. Specifically in this case, we will be talking about integrating it with the Gemini API via the Vertex AI SDK. But just to give you the picture again, you might have seen this previously in some of the sessions, but really the stack, you've got the foundational models in different sizes, specifically the Gemini Pro models, and then you've got a couple of ways, right? Either via the AI Studio, the Vertex AI one, that's the SDK we'll be seeing today. Of course, Duet AI is the assistant. That's right at the top. But really, this is to just get you onto the same page. Now, just digging down into what we'll be actually integrating or what our application will be using today, right? So you've seen over the time, like let's say the last 6 months, including the more recent ones, there have been several foundational models that we have released. And at the moment, the current one that we are talking about is the Gemini, model, and which is a multimodal model. It could, even take inputs in terms of say images and videos, and not just text-based input and so on. Of course, prior to that, you had the Palm models. There are also very specific models that are available from a code generation perspective or from a image generation editing perspective. But the one that we will be taking a look at today and which is integrated into our application is the Gemini one. And just from the documentation thing, I've just got this page over here to just ensure that you can be aware that there are two models that we've got here. So we've got the Gemini Pro model, and we've got the Gemini Pro Vision model. Now, of course, the Pro model is, it's about the prompts which can only take text, but the Pro Vision models are the ones that can take, both text as well as video or image, into the prompts. You can combine that into different parts. So, for example, you can pass in an image and say what you see in the image, or analyze the image with whatever you want from it. We'll be seeing both of these examples. The application that we'll be providing to you actually exercises not just the Gemini Pro model, but even the Pro Vision model with various kinds of prompts, analyzing videos, analyzing images, asking questions of it. It's also, demonstrates very basic text-based generation thing also based on text prompts that you could do. For example, generate a marketing campaign or write a story for me based on these characters or these styles. We'll see all of that. But primarily, just to mention, these are the two models that we will be exercising today. This slide is really there to give you some sort of ideas in terms of how you could potentially use the Gemini Pro Vision model. So it's not just about extracting, maybe text from images, but you could ask questions of the image. You could ask questions of the video, for example, and so on. So these are just different examples. And later on, when we see the application in action, you will see that we sort of combined all of these examples, not just maybe extracting out text, but even like what do you see in it, maybe write an ad for this video that you see over here, or at times maybe give me some instructions on how to do that. So all of these things are primarily to just sort of trigger your ideas in terms of how you could use a multimodal thing like Gemini Provision, and pass not just maybe text, but primarily integrate it with either images, videos, and then ask questions of that. Now, you might say that what sort of SDK support that we've got. Well, we'll be showing you Streamlit, which is sort of Python like, and then it uses that. But keep in mind, this is to also highlight that there are different programming languages that we are supporting, so you could use any one of these depending upon your preferred choice. These SDKs are available. Now, I mentioned we are going to be looking at Gemini Pro, and we are also going to be looking at Gemini Pro Vision. Now, in the code, obviously, this is really the whole SDK, the Python-based SDK that I'm showing you. So first, I've got the text model and how do we invoke that. Then the next slide will show you the whole, how you can combine the vision thing, right? So the point is that how do we, for example, uh, use this API? So what I'll be doing over here is to just show you, for example, this is the text model. And in the text model, right, you can see over here that it's the Gemini Pro model that we are using. Of course, we've got in the configuration the temperature tokens, etc. But you see over here that it's all about calling the generate content method on the prompt. We pass in the configuration, and then it gives back the responses. Similarly, the next thing that we may want to do is the whole provision model. And in the provision model, what we've got is it's literally the same way, except we specify what's the vision model that we are, sorry, the Gemini provision model that we are going to be using. And the prompt list is not just text now, but it's actually a combination of images and text. So you could say, here is an image, can I ask a question on it, and so forth, right? Now, uh, this is an important thing that I wanted to highlight over here, and this is about how do we now combine all of these things together. So what we've got is actually at the center the Gemini model, and in the Gemini model, what we have is we've got the Vertex AI SDK, the Python SDK, for example, that you're using. Now you could either write APIs, which could like either in Cloud Function, it could be in Cloud Run. So these could be APIs where you're wrapping around the model, or you could also say, I'm going to write Cloud Run applications, and it could be any of the popular frameworks, could be Flask, could be Streamlit, could be, Gradio. And then this could either talk to those APIs, or it could directly combine the Gemini model SDK itself. So you've got all these combinations by which you could do that. So you might say, for example, I'll just wrap an API of the Gemini model in Cloud Run or Cloud Function, and then can I just invoke the the thing directly from my application? So we will actually see later on a Streamlit application that I'm going to be using the Gemini SDK directly, and then calling it and then deploying it on Cloud Run. That's what we are going to be seeing. Now, before I go and actually show you the code and the steps to deploy it, I just wanted to make sure that you are able to see this application that we've built, so that eventually when you study this application and code, you will see that we've used both Gemini Pro and Gemini Pro Vision model in different ways, different use cases, so that you can see how it can be used. If you want to probably just execute that also, we've given the link as well as the QR code for that. So let me now just switch over to the application so that we can see this application in action. Okay, sorry. So I'm actually showing you now the what do you call, the application that's there. And if you see this application right now, what we are doing in this is as follows. This is the application that's deployed, which is in Streamlit. What we are going to be doing now is just to see some of these things in action. So we've got various things, right from using the Gemini text model itself, to also, for example, in if you go on images, we've got different use cases like furniture recommendation based on images. We've got, for example, what kind of glasses might be best suited. You can actually exercise all of these. So for example, if you go to the pro text model only, we're actually saying here generate a story, and we are taking in some inputs. So what's the character name, type of character, some of the premise, creativity level based on which the temperatures would be set, etc. And then when we click on generate the story, this is when it goes in the background. It goes ahead and then invokes the Gemini API with a prompt. We're also showing what the prompt is used. So write a short story based on the character name, the type, etc. And then it sort of gives you an entire output. Similarly, for example, let's say if we go to one of the image use cases over here, here we've got some images and we are saying which might be a good choice, either oval or not, sorry, depending upon the face shape, and you could get a recommendation based on that too. So again, the prompt, if you see, will actually say here, basically this is now for a pro vision model. So the prompt just says which of these glasses do you recommend, and here are some images that I've got, and it gives you some recommendation. Again, you are free to go through this application. It's got several other use cases also, which just show how inputs, videos, for example, are also used to sort of generate some of the descriptions or questions that you may have out of it. So having said that, I'll go back to my presentation that's there here. Let me go back into the mode. And how are we going to be going ahead and doing this, right? So first up, right, I've got, just at a very high level, we've got the Streamlit application. Of course, we're not going to be developing the whole thing line by line over here, but ideally you would be busy in the IDE or wherever you wish to develop this. So you'll develop this application, and later on we'll be having a set of instructions on how you could package this as a container, deploy this on a service like Cloud Run, and then of course the third step would be your users would use the application. So what we've done so far is I just took that URL and I'm just using it from the browser. So basically it was hitting a Cloud Run endpoint, and then that's the output that you saw over here. So we'll be doing the step 2 in a lot more detail. I'll show you all the steps that are required to package it and then deploy it on Cloud Run. Now, all of this code, as we mentioned, is again available on GitHub. So just like how you've had some of the previous, notebooks, you could go ahead and take a look at it step by step. So just for a moment, if I again go back to the what do you call the GitHub page itself, you will notice here that in the same generative AI, repository, under the Gemini folder, sample apps, we've got the whole Streamlit application, which we will be deploying right now on Cloud Run. And we'll be taking a look at some of these files. But as you can see, every single step which I will be doing in a while from now, these are the steps that you can also run in your own accounts and try out every single thing right till you finally deploy this thing on Google Cloud. So we'll be taking a look at all of this, but this is just to again highlight that these steps are all available in our GitHub repository. So before I go there, let me go back to the slideshow mode. So that's the link that we've got to our GitHub repository and the instructions to do that. Now, the application that we are going to be using is the Streamlit application. And again, here, it's not like, this is the only way to sort of develop the applications. We just maybe use this framework as a way, because it's a popular framework. It helps in rapid prototyping, etc. But you're free to use, let's say, even any other framework, any other programming language also, because at the end of the day, what you will notice is that we've actually got a Docker file via which we package this into a container. And when we do that, that's more than enough for Cloud Run, which is able to run these containers for us. That's pretty much what's needed. So Streamlit is an option that we have used out here to develop this application, but you could potentially develop it in any other framework that you choose, as long as you're able to Dockerize it. That's the key point over here. So going back to the diagram, which I had earlier shown, we will be seeing now steps to actually do this whole application. So right from the source code repository, I've just sort of cloned it locally right now, so that we can directly go on to the steps. But you will notice that I will trigger a build, then that will push the, or basically build out the image, put it into an artifact registry, and then finally we will deploy to Cloud Run from the registry itself. So we will see all of these steps in action. To summarize the action, this is again a repository link with README is given over here. But really speaking, the steps are as follows. We'll be anyways cloning and putting the code into the Cloud Shell IDE, which I'll be using out here. But then I will show you the steps one by one from the README itself, where locally also you can see the application in action. But once you're ready, we can create our repository. We can build the image, push it into the repository via Cloud Build, and finally we use Cloud Run to deploy the service from that container image. So given that, right, I'll be now just going through each of these steps one by one into the README. So let me come out of it, and the whole demo, or basically how we go about doing this, begins right now. So first up, right, what I will be doing is I'm going to be going to my Google Cloud console over here. And as you can see in my console, I'm in Google Cloud console. I'm there in my specific project over here. And what I've also done is I've launched the Cloud Shell IDE that you're seeing over here. So in the Cloud Shell IDE, right, I have just cloned that repository and those particular 4 to 5 files that you're seeing. Again, just to switch back to the repository, these are the same files that you see, which are present in the GitHub repository. So what we have is we've got one application file which has all the code, the Streamlit application in it. In addition to that, we've got a Docker file which sort of packages the whole thing together. You can see we install the required dependencies, we expose it on a particular port, and then we also provide what's the command to sort of launch the application, which is Streamlit. So those of you who are familiar with Streamlit, it's a Streamlit run command. Suppose if you were running, let's say, a Flask-based application, you might probably use any of the other servers, or probably even just Python and the particular file. But it's completely up to you how you write this Docker file. And of course, the other file that we've got over here is the requirements file for the 3 packages that we have over here. Nothing too much that's going on over here. So as you can see, we've not done anything vis-a-vis Cloud Run as such at this point in time, right? We've got our application.python file, which has the Streamlit application, and it has got the Gemini, invocation, etc. that's going on. Then we've got the Docker file, and then we've got the requirements.python file. So I've kind of cloned this over here onto my Cloud Shell IDE that you do. So let me just reload this as it comes up. So once again, I'm in my Google Cloud project, and I'm also selected that particular project. I'm inside my IDE, and I'll just open up that particular folder, which has those files over here, right? So now, just to show you what are the tool sets that we have got available. I've not yet deployed yet on Google Cloud Run or any of that services. I'm still in the IDE. I've got these files. What I'm going to do is to just show you what things could be available to run it locally, right? So first up, without doing too many things, I'm just going to create the local Python virtual environment from this. So again, I'm just going to be using the commands that are there to create the environment. Let me just go through that, and based on the requirements dot text file, let it just go ahead and create these the virtual environment so that I can then run my things locally. Yeah, just give it a few seconds more to create the environment. Now, these steps which I'm doing also, I just wanted to highlight it to you that as you look at this documentation over here, we've also shown how do you run the application locally on Cloud Shell itself, right? So, what I've done, of course, from the IDE was to create this virtual environment, but you could have created it even via the commands that are given over here. So, it requires two, I would say, environment variables that we need to set, because these are used then to initialize the Vertex AI API endpoint in terms of which project it's being running on and where it's hosted. So we just have to set these two, which I'll be doing in a while. So if I go back to my UI, the environment is created. I'll just now go ahead and launch a new terminal from here. I'll just probably get this a little. Okay. So I'm in my virtual environment, and basically I need to set two variables. One is the GCP region, which is, let's say, US Central. Uh, so for example, the instructions are given over here, US dash Central one, and your specific GCP project ID. So US Central one, and then I have the GCP project, which is the project ID. In this case, it's the GCP. This is my project ID. So I'm just setting that 349209. Okay. So now that I have these two variables set up, before I even deploy, let's say I'm doing my local development, I make some changes, etc. I just want to preview this whole thing. So for you might be aware that we also provide a web preview over here on a particular port 8080, for example, or any other port that you want. So from the README command, we've actually got the whole command that's given out to you, where you can just run it locally itself. So I'll just copy this command, and I'm going to be over here. I'll just paste that and run it, right? So as you can see, it started on localhost 8080, but since this is in Cloud Shell, how do I get there, right? So we've got this web preview, and if you click on that, and of course it's on port 8080, or I could change the port. I can simply click on this port, and over here right now, what it's done is, as you can see, that same Streamlit application is coming up. And just as a small test, I'll just generate this particular story, and I'll just make sure everything is looking fine. And this is how I can iteratively develop over here. Maybe start my server, stop my server, preview it over here itself. I've not yet deployed anywhere, because you don't want to deploy it and then debug it. Okay, there was some probably issue, but that's okay. It's kind of running over here right now. So this is just to show you the local setup. Now, what I can do is go back to the steps that are given. Now, how do I build and deploy this entire application to Cloud Run? So again, the steps are similar, where we are setting the two variables that you are seeing over here. But then, as the slides had mentioned, if I just go back to that particular thing, we are going to be now creating the container into and then pushing it into our artifact registry, and then deploying it from there. So the steps that we are going to be seeing are also given in the README thing. So what we'll be doing now is, we've set anyways these two things, but since it takes the whole file and folder, I'll just sort of remove the virtual environment so that the files are a little bit smaller and I don't package my whole dependencies. So I'll just go back to, sorry about this reauthorization. Okay. So I'll just come out of this local server that I have over here, right? And one of the ways I can do this is just follow the steps over here. So as you know, I've already set the commands for the GCP project and the GCP region. So next up, I need to create the artifact registry, and I also need to give a name for the service. So first two export commands which you're seeing are primarily just setting some variables for what my artifact registry repository name is and what my service name is. So I could just maybe for the moment like go back and just set my repository name. So maybe this is let's call it my AR repo, and maybe I'll just give sorry 13th. Okay, and this is one variable. Sorry. Okay, and the other one is my service name. So I will just maybe take this, and I can give a service name. This is basically your Cloud Run service name. It can be anything unique out there for your services. So I will just take that, and maybe in the service name, I'll just say my Streamlit app and maybe Feb 13th. Okay, now what I'm going to be doing next is to create the artifact registry where the container image will be stored. So that's these commands which you see over here. That first I need to create an artifact registry with that repository name and whatever be the region. And you can see that the repository format is Docker because that's the Docker image which we'll be eventually using Cloud Build for, which you see in the third step, and pushing it over there. So I'll just take this and create the artifact registry. Now, as it gets created, I'll show you what's happening behind the scenes also, because that's important. So now that the repository is created, let's go for a moment into Cloud console. And if we go to something called artifact registry over here, let it come up. Sorry. Okay. So as you can see over here, I can maybe just show you the when it was created. So I'll just sort that. And if you see is just now, the one that we created was the my AR repository Feb 13. If I actually see what's inside of that, right now it's going to be empty because we have not yet built anything. So it's currently empty. There's no container image that's pushed into this whole thing. So having said that, I'll just go back to the next step into it, which is we'll just configure the the Docker command for this, where which repository it needs to be talking into. In this case, it's the artifact registry base root. So I'll just take this, go back to the command here, and this is the configuration part, and then I'm going to be firing the cloud build command. So I'm going to be taking the gcloud build submit, and you can see it actually creates a container image with that particular project repository name and the service name. Now, this will take a bit of time because it packages the whole thing, sends it up there, builds the container image, pushes it into the artifact registry. So let's let that go on in the background, and we'll take a look at some of the code also. So let me go back and at least fire the command. So we'll just clear this, and we are going to be firing this command. Now what happens is it's going to be, of course, I could have removed the virtual environment to make it smaller. That would have been a good practice. That's why it's looking this big. But it's basically going to take all of this, zip it, push it into the cloud build service, and cloud build service will then utilize the Docker file that we have provided. So it will use actually all of these requirements to create the container image. And once that's done, we'll come to it in a while. We will then look at the registry, and we'll find that our container image is ready, and then we can deploy the things. So while that's happening, let this go on. What I'll be also doing is just going back to this source code over here. So let's take a look at some of that source code so that we see that also. So in app.py, right, as you like, for example, when I was displaying this, we've got several sections. We've got just text-based input and output, which uses the Gemini Pro text model. We've also got things like image inputs, which you could use, and we've also got the video-based inputs. Now, all of this code basically is present into this single file. And like I mentioned, why were we setting those project and GCP regions? That was primarily because the Vertex AI has to be initialized with what's the project and location. So that's what we were setting out there. Now, um, we've created two methods. Like I'd shown you the code of how you could invoke the text model, right? So we've just got two helper functions that are out there. It just takes in as input what's the model that we are talking about, what's the particular prompt, and then, so as you can see over here, we just do a generate content based on the prompt that is there, as well as then what are the configuration parameters that are passed. Similarly, if it's a vision response, we've actually got a prompt list which could be different parts. It could be the an image, a video, and text, and so on. Now, very quickly, I'll also show you, for example, that part that talks about generating a story, right? So if we see that, you find over here that it's generating story or marketing campaign image, the four tabs which you see on top. In generate story, which is this one, we've got the character name, we've got character type. These are the inputs that we are taking. And then finally, if you notice over here, depending on whether you want control, creativity low or high, we set the temperature and so on. And then you'll see the entire prompt that is built out here. So this is the prompt that is then eventually passed into Gemini. So for example, we take in all the variables, we create this prompt, and finally we are going to be invoking the helper method that we've got, which says that, okay, I want to talk to the text pro model itself. I'm going to pass in the prompt and any other configuration parameters. And then it just gets back the output from Gemini and then writes the response. Similarly, for example, if you see all of these use cases, like a marketing campaign for anything else, or we've also got the vision model, right, which has got those glasses things. So if I just search for that, the glasses recommendation, you will find over here that it just says, okay, I've got these two glasses. Could you provide me a recommendation, for example? And then some questions that are asked. And finally, here, as you go down, you will find we are calling the provision model for its response. So this again is nothing but the helper method that I talked about, which takes in the prompt list, which could be multiple parts, and then we simply call the generate content method on it. Now, if I just go back to what was happening over here, it's still going on a bit of our build process. So just see what's happened. It's actually going ahead, and Cloud Build is taking all our dependencies. So it's doing the pip install, the entry point, which you see. This is all being executed from this Docker file, and it creates the container image. So as you see over here, it's still going on and pushing the container image that's built, and it will go into the artifact registry. So let's give it like maybe it should hopefully get done in another minute or so. But then once it's done, you will find that the container image is now going to be pushed into the registry. And just before I do the step, just to show you that particular thing, let's go back to a bit of the code that's out here. So I go back to the Cloud Run thing and the instructions. And in instructions here, what we've done is we've so far executing this particular command, which is to build the container image. And finally, the next step, once it's done, would be to deploy this image to the Cloud Run service. So let's see if it's complete. Okay, it's still going on. Let's give it some time. Ideally, this would have got done much faster if we had not used the virtual environment, but I kind of did not remove that. If I had removed it, the size would have been much smaller. It would have got done a bit faster. But that's okay for now, because in any ways, Cloud Build service will look at all our dependencies and run the whole thing again. Yeah. So I think it's almost there. Let's give it a few more seconds while it's doing that. Okay, so it's done right now and it's successfully done. So you can see it says that the image is present over here. But what we could do is I will just go ahead and go back to this the repository that I've got to show you that something got created. Maybe let me go back to the updated one. I'll sort that on just now. So you can see that our repo has got updated. I'll just click on that repository and you will see that now it's got actually one of those Docker container images that has got created. So if you look at the image, of course, it will have certain details on that. So if you have newer versions of it, like the Docker container image versions, you'll actually see a whole list. But this has been built as of a minute back, and if you look at that, I mean, the further details on this, you will see things like commands that could be used to either push or pull. So what we've done right now is we've taken the Streamlit application, we've packaged it as a container, we have used cloud build to create the container image, and we have pushed it into the repository or the artifact repository. So basically the whole image, right, is present. Right, if you look at the path, it'll be this base plus the project plus the repository name and the image or the service name that we selected. So the last step would be to now deploy this in Cloud Run. So we are going to be looking at again the steps, and this is the final step to deploy it in Cloud Run. I'll just copy this. As you can see, it's one of the gcloud commands to interact with Cloud Run service. We are deploying our service name, and see the image. The image is taken as per what we built right now. So I'll just take this and I will go back to the terminal here, maybe just clear this and run this command. So now this is actually going to end up doing a deploy to Cloud Run, and you can see it's taken a service name that we gave. It has my GCP project ID. It's also got the particular region. So it's deploying it from that image, and then once it's done, it'll use that as the latest revision, divert traffic to it, and so on. And once it's done, we will be getting a URL. This URL will be the actual endpoint in Cloud Run service that we can invoke. So let's give it a few more seconds to sort of complete this up. Okay. So as you can see, it says that it's completed, and it's also given you this particular service URL. If you go to Cloud Run service in Google Cloud, you will similarly see the same URL. So for example, instead of this, if I from my console, if I just go to Cloud Run product page, and of course I've got several services out here, but I could just go to my last deployed, and you can see it's just now, and it's the Streamlit app of Feb 13th. Of course, it gives you metrics and everything. So basically, this is our Cloud Run, dashboard for your particular service. You also see this URL right here on top. This URL is literally the same as the one that you are seeing, which has been deployed via a command. So any one of these ways, you could actually go and click on that. So this is now a public endpoint URL, which you could then share with any of your users. So this is our same Streamlit app, but which has been deployed from our image. It's deployed on Cloud Run. And from the endpoint that we have over here, you've got the entire thing. So for example, let's take, maybe a image playground and maybe the glasses recommendation, and just say generate a recommendation. Hopefully this works. And we get a recommendation. So again, just to show you, you can look at this source code, see all these different use cases, maybe modify them for your images, your text, etc., and then deploy it in the same sequence of steps that we have given. You can literally automate the whole thing also. Yeah. So this is the output that's coming out from there. So if I go back to my presentation, that's the demo thing. Just to reiterate the steps, right? What we did is we took the source code, we set a few environment variables like GCP region and the project to initialize Vertex AI. Then We had written a Docker file which we used to create which is used to create the container image. So we use Cloud Build to push that image then into the artifact registry repository that we created, and finally we deployed the container image from there to Cloud Run and saw the same application. Though that was part of the demo. That's pretty much what I have, in terms of my session today. Thank you very much for staying with me through the sequence of steps. Keep in mind, all of these things are there available, for you to try out step by step, not just the application, but even the steps to do that. I encourage go through the source code, see if you want to modify some use cases for your images or with your different prompts, etc. It should be straightforward to do the same, and then use the power of Cloud Run serverless tools to really get this application in the hands of your initial users or customers. Yeah, that's what I have in terms of my entire presentation and demo. Thank you.
Very much for demoing. It's always great to see how it works in practice. We've received that feedback many, many times that we should show more and more the real life examples. So thank you for that. I'll give you a short break, and I will before we go to the Q&A. So thank you for now. With that, one reminder for all of you. Yesterday, you have received our feedback form in our weekly recap email. So please, if you haven't yet, just take a short look and give a few grades to our instructors last week. This is how it works. We pay our instructors with the feedback. They love to know how they are doing and whether you like the classes and what can be done better. So find the email from yesterday, and if you can, give us just a few minutes of your feedback. What I'm showing you right now, you probably know it already, but for those that don't know, we've been suggesting a couple of notebooks to run, and today's demo need a Cloud Console as well. So there are a few options for you to set up your account and not pay any money for testing and practicing. One of them, of course, is a free trial that we have for the new users with $300. But since this is a startup school and you are most probably a founder, CTO, or a developer at startup, your company, depending on the stage you are, can receive lots of credits, cloud credits, and more than just credits from us under Google for Startups Cloud program. The application is pretty simple. We just need a couple of information about your business. And if you're a bootstrap startup still looking for funding, you can get $2,000 in credits. If you are a company backed by VC, you can get $100,000 per year, or even $250,000 if you are AI company. So there's something for all, depending on your stage. All the details are under this QR code under Google/Cloud-program. But it's not only credits, it's also experts. It's also support from startup success managers. It's credits to Google Maps, to Skills Boost, your favorite platform, and many, many more. So be sure to share this with your colleagues, with fellow founders, maybe with other startups that might be interested to start building Gen AI solutions on Google Cloud. This is intended, as I mentioned, for startups, so this should fit you very, very well. With that, I would love to invite Roman again, because we have a couple of questions that were coming from our users. So I'll just start right away with the one from Nir Guzman. Nir is saying both Cloud Run and Cloud Functions are serverless. Which use cases are best for each? Like we know very well the cloud environment, our attendants might not. For example, when to use Cloud Run and when to use functions, assuming that containerizing effort is not a parameter. And Nir is asking. So Cloud Run, Cloud Functions, those serverless options, and from your experience, Roman, best use cases and the best tips about these.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And it's an interesting one because we get that often in terms of what would be the best use cases or scenarios in which we could use one over the other. And as you rightly mentioned, if containerizing is not like a parameter, then the first thing I would probably look at is the abstraction. That's the first way I would look at it. And when I mean abstraction, it's like, do you want an abstraction at the level of just a function, or do you want it much larger than that, like probably an application or a full blown API or things like that? So, for example, let's say that you want to say that I just want to maybe provide an endpoint which will maybe invoke the Gemini API and get back a response. I don't want people to worry about what goes on behind in their SDK. I figured it out. I've written a neat function, and that's something. If I could just use maybe an abstraction at a function level, probably Cloud Functions is a good use case for that. However, if you probably are saying that, look, I've got several and I would say parts, maybe like an API that I'm creating, or if it's a full blown application, then that abstraction is more well suited to a cloud run sort of a scenario. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, I'll talk about cloud run first, is that it gives you a little bit more flexibility, or maybe quite a lot of flexibility, because it lets you package an application with your framework, with your dependencies, in the way that you would eventually like, because at the end of it, it'll containerize it and run it for you. If you look at cloud functions, the first thing you will have to do is see what are the programming languages or versions that it supports. That's one. After that, you would have to still ensure that it does follow some kind of a, I would say, opinionated way in which you format your functions. The parameters get passed to you, etc. So you'll still have to write your functions in a certain manner. So I would say, if it's like one-off functions that you want to sort of generalize, give it outside, are okay with some of the programming languages and versions that function supports, and the cloud functions is a better use case. But if it's a full blown application, full blown APIs, Cloud Run gives you a lot more flexibility to use much more popular frameworks just the way you would want to. That's where I would start with. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I have another one, and it is related to RAG. We have covered RAG, I think it was week 3 earlier, but David McCready is asking, can you find some worked examples of how to set up a Gemini generator in Dialogflow CX using RAG configuring custom datasets?
Okay. From whatever I know of Dialogflow, CX, of course, I think as we go along, maybe in terms of the roadmap, there may be a more closer integration with the Gemini models and invocating it. But if I had to do this, I would say right now the way I would probably think about doing it is that I would need to maybe give a API endpoint that I can potentially invoke from my CX code. So basically, some endpoint that's sort of wrapping your application or the RAG service that you've got in order to get the output for this. The thing I've actually noticed, and this is one feature I would encourage you to actually go and see if it works out well, is in Gemini we've got something called Gemini function calling, which is a very interesting way by which you can actually inform the model that here are some APIs that can potentially be called. So actually you make a first call to Gemini, and it'll give you back what's the API you can invoke. Then you invoke it, get back the response, and give it back to Gemini. So basically, the second stage, you sort of grounded it with the responses that you're getting from your application. So just to reiterate, yes, you will need an API endpoint to get your whatever the data that or the request that you're making. But I'll also encourage you, take a look at Gemini function calling. That's a very interesting way by which you can integrate the Gemini model and still ground it with your data. So for example, one of the complaints that usually we have from some of the foundational models is that they are not recent. So you can't expect that if you make a call like what's the weather today in a certain city, then it's not, probably it'll give you some answer, but it's not going to be like the correct one. In this case, you are actually expecting that the model should somehow route it to the API that gives you the latest data. But you still want to work with the model. So Gemini function calling, we've got an interesting code lab also. Just take a look. But even in the documentation that's available, that will give you some hints on how you could combine these two together. That would be my way to look at it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. I'll just want to reiterate that you just mentioned the code labs, and yes, this is a perfect way to take a look and practice. When it comes to today's demo, I've already linked this. So for all of you, under your favorite link, GenAI-Labs, you will have absolutely everything. Also, today's demos and the GitHub repo that you might have missed or you didn't have a time to scan the QR code. But with that, we were talking just we touched upon RAG and on this dialog flow question, and now Iker Gonzalez is also asking for like an advice when you have the deployment pipeline. On which step would you fit RAG when you have the whole pipeline? You probably deployed a lot, so what are your recommendations here?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, if you're looking to deploy the application, then obviously that whole end-to-end flow that we saw today, in terms of that, or actually the steps that I demonstrated, in terms of creating the artifact registry, building the image, and then deploying a service from there. I would say on an iterative basis, the repository may already be created. So you might have to set up some kind of an automation. Now it completely depends on how you want to do that. Do you want to just trigger a new version of your RAG application to be built if you check in some source code, or do you need some manual approval? But in either case, that would trigger the cloud build step that we saw, which would then go ahead and deploy a new version of your application. So you need to first of all understand what's the trigger based on which you want to generate a new version of your application. And once you've done that, you use the other commands like because let me step back a bit. I think deploying the applications in the real world, there might be several either approvals or different environments before you promote them to production. So you'll have to mix all of that together also with some of the whole context in which you're doing this. But the things would be, when do you trigger a build, and when do you deploy it, and when do you promote it? So we've got commands to do all of these. You'll just have to see how that fits into your specific organization, or the way they would want to do it, because you might not want to do it in an automated fashion. Maybe some tests need to be run before it's fit for a promotion to production. So I think some of those concepts from which we've been doing for a long time now still apply. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I see my little elves, as I love to call my friends, helping me with this project on the back end. Are sending me one more for you. This one comes from Andrew Orlov, and it's about image processing. A very specific case. Let's say I need to process few images just to save some time. So as you see, the parameter here is to saving time. Just to save time, would you recommend running multiple requests to Gemini in different threads?
Okay. Um, Let me answer this question by giving you like what we've learned today, cloud functions, for example, and sort of combine it with that. So So while we could still discuss that, we've got, let's say, 10 images to sort of process, and maybe you've got an application that says, look at this image and maybe show me the tags or categories that the image belongs to. Let's say we want to do some task like that. You figured out the prompts and everything is in place. Now, uh, based on what we've learned today, this is something that could go very well into a cloud function, where you can say that here is a cloud function, it's passed an image URL, and it's also passed a prompt, or basically it knows what the prompt is. So basically it takes the image URL, invokes Gemini, gets the tags, and then maybe pushes it into some other upstream or downstream application. Now, the way I would do this, and this is what cloud function supports very well, is we've seen an endpoint, and you can always go ahead and trigger it by putting in the URL or post, doing a post or a get on it. But what if I tell you, you could combine this so well with another service that we've got called Google Cloud Storage? So maybe in the bucket, you you have a separate process that just uploads the images, and the trigger now for the cloud function, which inside has the Gemini code, is going to be that when someone uploads a object into a bucket, please invoke my cloud function. So basically, now what you've done is you've taken away, basically, now the true power of serverless and everything comes into play. All you're saying is, I'll have probably another application for consumers or my backend team to just keep uploading my applications, sorry, my images, which go into a bucket. From there, a trigger simply invokes the cloud function, which has the Gemini thing. So basically, that whole function invocation, running it, and even if tomorrow there are like probably 10,000 images, or you wish to scale, that's taken care of by the cloud function scaling. So that's how I would probably architect this whole thing. Nothing stops you from saying, that probably in my function I'll process as many images come true. But remember, there is always a time limit to which a function can keep running. Ideally, you want your functions to be short, they execute quickly, and they are invoked, they do their work, and they are done. And this is all taken care of by the runtime. So I would say that what we have seen today is just a way by which I directly invoked the endpoint. But you can also see services like, for example, PubSub. You can see services like Google Cloud Storage. And if an object is pushed into that or a message is published to PubSub, the function gets invoked. And basically, the data is also passed to it. So it works beautifully, the role integration. You will see we've also got some examples in our documentation that will show you how do you combine, like a image processing pipeline using cloud functions. And your code or the logic in your function would be what you're saying, which is it invokes the Gemini for whatever it needs to understand from the image. That's how I would put it. And thanks for this question, because it sort of even highlights how we could use what we learned today in cloud functions. Yeah.
Um, Absolutely, and thank you so much. And I remember one of yours, from first slides from today when you were showing like how it all works together and how different elements come into play. And I think it could be overwhelming, I think, for developers that are not that familiar with Google Cloud environment, let's call it this way, yet. So many different products and solutions, and you have a storage, and you have run, and you have functions and Kubernetes and this and that. But it can, I mean, if you are a skilled Google Cloud architect, you can really orchestrate this very well, and so that it's playing in a nice rhythm and it's doing exactly what you need, and it's efficient. Andrew Hugh was mentioning, time, and time is a very important factor in many services. So just using the cloud environment and knowing different elements of that environment, how they can work together, is a crucial thing. Thank you very much, Roman, for today. I don't see any other questions sent by my moderators here to talk. So thank you once again for your time and your expertise and showing us the demo. For all of you attendants today, I want to once more resurface that you have the Q&A panel, that our moderators are still typing answers to a couple of your questions. I've heard that towards the end of the demo. There are more and more. So if you haven't been yet answered, then just wait a couple more minutes. I want to invite you to our next session on Thursday, Valentine's today, and on 15th of February, we're going to meet again on Startup School. We're going to have Catherine, our Gen AI Solutions lead, talking about tuning and reinforced learning with the human factor, if I remember the full abbreviation correctly, or actually reinforced learning from human feedback. Yes, human feedback. F stands for feedback. We've talked a little bit and touched upon it a little bit on our prompt engineering session, where we were talking a bit of the temperatures and we were talking about the design of prompts and how we can tune them. But I think we are already in the week 5. We are already very advanced when it comes to the Gen AI solutions. So you're gonna hear a lot about how to fine-tune your model and how to use this RLHF technique, which needs human feedback for machine learning. So exciting one, complicated one. But if you, just like me, want to be a Gen AI specialist, I think you cannot miss this one. So with that, thank you once again for your time, and happy Tuesday, happy rest of the day, and see you on Thursday. See ya.